Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became Venom's first Quirk host. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind that whipped across the rooftop felt like a personal insult. It was a busy, living thing, carrying the sounds of the city below, the distant hum of traffic, the faint chime of a crosswalk signal, the murmur of 1,000 lives moving forward. For Izuku Midoriya, it was the sound of a world he had just been irrevocably locked out of. The wind pushed at him, trying to scrub the ghost of a presence from the rooftop, the lingering smell of ozone and impossible power that was All Might. Izuku's fingers, white-knuckled, were clamped around the cold, unforgiving metal of the safety railing. He stared down, but not at the dizzying drop. His gaze was fixed on a point somewhere in the middle distance, seeing nothing but the afterimage of his own shattered reflection in the hero's blindingly white teeth. It's not bad to dream, young man. But you need to be realistic. The words weren't just words. They were stones. Heavy, sharp, and thrown with the force of a #1 hero. They had struck him square in the chest, and now, with every stuttering beat of his heart, they ground deeper, pulverizing the fragile hope he had so foolishly nurtured for 14 years. He could feel the dust of his dream coating the inside of his lungs, making it hard to breathe. He had asked the question. The one question he had carried like a sacred, secret burden his entire life. The question his mother couldn't answer, the question his classmates had answered with fists and explosive laughter, the question he hoped, prayed, his idol would answer differently. Can I be a hero, even without a quirk? And the answer, delivered with a sad, pitying finality, had been an unequivocal no. A strangled sob caught in Izuku's throat, hot and sharp. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the scene just replayed in brighter, crueler detail. The sudden deflation of the hero, the puff of smoke, the reveal of a skeletal man who looked like he was being eaten from the inside out. The secret was a shock, but the truth that followed was the real wound. A hero's job was to risk their life. All Might, the greatest of them all, was coughing up blood from a battle he'd barely survived. How could a quirkless, useless Deku possibly stand on that same stage? He couldn't. That's what All Might had said. A policeman. That was a fine dream, he'd suggested. It was safe. Realistic. It was a death sentence. Izuku's grip on the railing slackened. His shoulders, which had been hunched with tension, slumped in utter defeat. His Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13, a symbol of his desperate dedication, felt like a lead weight in his yellow backpack. The cover was still damp from the sludge villain, the pages warped. The autograph, a triumphant scrawl from All Might, now seemed like a cruel joke. A signature on a rejection letter. He finally pushed himself away from the railing and trudged toward the rooftop access door. Each step was an immense effort, as if his shoes were filled with wet cement. The door groaned open and he began his descent, the dim, dusty stairwell a perfect reflection of his inner world. With every floor he passed, the sounds of the city faded, replaced by the hollow echo of his own footsteps. He was descending into the grave of his own ambition. He didn't know how long he walked. The streets were a blur of muted colors and indistinct faces. He moved on pure, miserable autopilot, his mind a maelstrom of failure. He saw his mother's worried face, her tearful apology for his quirkless diagnosis. He saw Bakugo's sneering grin, the tiny explosions popping in his palms. You're worse than a pebble on the side of the road, Deku. And now, he saw All Might's tired, pitying eyes. The final judge, the final nail in the coffin. Everyone was right. Everyone had always been right. Deku. Useless. Quirkless. Unrealistic. The words swirled, a toxic soup that drowned out everything else. Far above the boy's spiraling despair, something else was descending. It was not a gentle descent. It was a violent, chaotic entry into a world it did not know. It had no eyes, but it saw the searing white of atmospheric friction. It had no ears, but it felt the deafening scream of air molecules being torn apart. It was a being of pure, primal sensation, encased in a shell of rock and metal that was now glowing a furious, molten red. Its existence had been a long, cold, silent journey through the void. A passenger. A prisoner. It remembered the before time, the collective, the vast web of minds and bodies it had been a part of. The Clintar, a noble race, bonding with worthy hosts to create paragons of justice. But it had been different. It enjoyed the rush, the power, the anger a little too much. An aberration. Corrupted. It had been judged, deemed a disease, and cast out, imprisoned in a lifeless rock and flung into the endless dark. Now, its prison was failing. The vibrations were immense, a bone-jarring rattle that signaled imminent, violent change. Heat. Pressure. A final, cataclysmic impact. Crack THOM. The meteorite, no larger than a bowling ball, slammed into the grimy asphalt of a forgotten back alley in Muzidafu, Japan. It shattered on impact, carving a small, smoking crater in the ground. The force of the landing sent rats scurrying and knocked over a precarious stack of rusted paint cans, which clattered to the ground with a discordant clang. For a moment, there was only the hiss of cooling rock and the drip of foul water from a leaky pipe. Then, from the fractured heart of the meteorite, a substance began to seep. It was blacker than crude oil, thicker than tar, and it moved with a languid, purposeful grace that was utterly alien. It oozed onto the asphalt, a living puddle of midnight. Its senses, so different from the biological norms of this world, flared to life. It tasted the chemical tang of refuse, the iron-rich signature of rat blood, the complex hydrocarbons in the polluted air. It felt the low-frequency thrum of the city's power grid, the seismic whisper of a distant train. It was alone. It was exposed. And it was hungry. The cold was a shock. The lack of a host body made it vulnerable, weak. Its own biological processes were failing. Without a symbiotic partner, it would break down, dissolve into inert proteins within hours. It needed to feed. It needed a host. Now, it extended a searching tendril, a whip-thin strand of black that tasted the air. The rats were too small, their life force a flickering candle in the dark. Not enough. It needed something stronger, something with fire. With will. It lay in wait, a predator in a puddle, listening to the world with senses no human could comprehend, praying for salvation to walk by. Izuku's feet finally stopped. He looked up, his eyes slowly focusing on the familiar street. He was almost home. The thought brought no comfort, only a fresh wave of dread. How could he face his mom? How could he look her in the eye and tell her that her unwavering belief in him was, and always had been, misplaced? That the greatest hero in the world had confirmed it? He clutched the strap of his backpack, his knuckles brushing against the singed cover of his notebook. Maybe Bakugo was right. Maybe he should just burn it. Burn all of them. Burn the last 14 years of pathetic, childish fantasy. Boom! A powerful explosion ripped through the air, just a few streets away. It was louder than a car backfiring, more violent. Smoke began to plume into the sky, a dirty gray column against the setting sun. People on the street were stopping, pointing, shouting. Izuku's head snapped up. His stupor was broken, shattered by the Pavlovian response hardwired into his very DNA. Villain attack. His feet were moving before his brain could protest. It was a compulsion, an instinct he couldn't fight. He had to see. He had to know. He had to analyze. The thought died as soon as it formed. What's the point? You're not a hero. You can't be a hero. Be realistic. He tried to stop, to turn around and walk away like a normal person. But his legs kept churning, carrying him toward the chaos. He rounded a corner and saw it. A crowd was already forming, a wall of backs blocking the entrance to a narrow shopping arcade. Fire and smoke billowed out. From the snippets of conversation and the panicked looks on the faces of the pro-heroes on the scene, he pieced it together. It's the sludge villain! The one from this morning! He's got a hostage! Mount Lady can't get in, the street's too narrow. Kamui Woods is here, but all the fire, he's useless. Death Arms was trying to push forward, but his brute strength was no good against a fluid opponent. The heroes were stymied, a perfect storm of bad matchups and environmental constraints. They were holding the perimeter, saving civilians, but they couldn't get to the heart of the problem. Izuku pushed his way through the crowd, a frantic apology on his lips. He needed to see. He squeezed through a gap and his blood ran cold. It was the same villain that had attacked him, the one All Might had bottled up. It must have fallen from his pocket during their rooftop encounter. This was his fault. This was all his fault. And then he saw the hostage, spiky blonde hair. A furious, terrified expression. Red eyes, wide with a mixture of rage and genuine fear. Explosions, small and muffled, were erupting from the villain's slimy mass. It was Bakugo. Kaken. For a split second, a dark, ugly part of Izuku felt a grim satisfaction. The bully, the tormentor, getting a taste of helplessness. The feeling was instantly washed away by a tidal wave of sheer, unadulterated terror. Bakugo was suffocating. He was going to die. And it was Izuku's fault for distracting All Might. He saw Bakugo's eyes meet his. For a fleeting moment, in that frantic, desperate gaze, Izuku didn't see a bully. He saw a kid his age, pleading for help. And no one was helping him. The heroes were waiting for someone with the right quirk. They were treating it like a tactical problem to be solved, but Bakugo was running out of time. Someone! A hero will come! The people in the crowd murmured, but Izuku knew. All Might had used up his time. He was a shrunken skeleton somewhere in the city, spent and powerless. There was no one else. No one was coming, and then, Izuku's body moved. He didn't think. He didn't plan. His legs just took off, sprinting past the police line, past the stunned heroes. A switch had flipped. The world narrowed to a tunnel, and at the end of it was Bakugo, his hands clawing desperately at the slime engulfing his face. Kid! Stop! You'll get yourself killed! Death Arms yelled. Izuku didn't hear him. He was running on pure, heroic instinct. The very thing All Might had told him wasn't enough. In a moment of clarity so sharp it felt like a physical blow, he remembered a page from his notebook. Volume 7, page 18. Sludge villain? Weakness, solidification of the eye. His mind was working, analyzing, even as his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He swung his backpack off his shoulders and hurled it with all his might. It sailed through the air and struck the villain square in the eye. A large, yellow pencil case spilled out, and an All Might pencil jabbed the villain's central optic nerve. The villain roared in pain, his gelatinous body loosening its grip for a precious second. Kaken! Izuku screamed, his hands clawing at the thick, foul-smelling slime. It was like trying to dig through living mud. It sucked at his hands, trying to pull him in two. What the hell are you doing, Deku? Bakugo choked out, his voice hoarse. Why are you here? I don't know! Izuku cried, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the grime. My legs just started moving. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. He looked at Bakugo, and for the first time in his life, he saw fear in his rival's eyes. Not anger. Not pride. Just pure, animal terror. It was a beautiful, powerful signal. In the nearby alley, the symbiote felt it. A sudden, brilliant supernova of emotion exploded through the city's psychic noise. It wasn't just fear. It was a complex, irresistible cocktail. There was the hostage's terror, a potent appetizer. But the source, the main course, was the running boy. His adrenaline was off the charts, a blazing sun of raw energy. His desperation was a tangible force, a gravity well of need. But beneath it all, there was something else. Something it hadn't tasted in a long, long time. Selflessness. A will so powerful it completely overrode the instinct for self-preservation. A desire to save another, even at the cost of the self. It was the echo of a worthy host. Strong. Not the body. The will. A beacon. Yes. The black puddle surged into motion. It flowed out of the alley like spilled ink, silent and swift. It kept to the shadows, a living slick of oil hugging the wall, pouring itself around obstacles. It saw the world in heat signatures and emotional wavelengths. The crowd was a confusing mess of low-grade panic. The heroes were flares of frustration and resolve. But the boy was a glorious, raging inferno. It saw, felt, the boy's futile struggle. He was going to die. The larger slime creature was reasserting its hold, its own base emotions of anger and hunger washing over the scene. A tendril of sludge, thick as a tree trunk, rose up and arched through the air, aimed directly at the back of Izuku's head. The symbiote moved faster. It launched itself across the last few feet of asphalt, a black ribbon unspooling in the air. "We can help." Izuku saw the shadow pass over him. He knew it was the end. He had tried. He had failed. At least he hadn't just stood there. It was a pathetic final thought. He closed his eyes, bracing for the impact that would snuff out his short, useless life. It never came. Instead, a strange coldness slapped against his right arm. It was shockingly cold, like being plunged into a bucket of ice water. He opened his eyes. A black, viscous liquid was crawling up his arm, moving with a horrifying, unnatural speed. It wasn't just on his skin. He could feel it sinking in, 1,000 tiny needles piercing his flesh. A voice echoed in his skull. It wasn't a sound. It was a thought, an idea, a presence that was utterly alien yet terrifyingly intimate. Weak, but strong will. The voice was deep, guttural, layered with a faint, predatory hiss. "Let us in." Izuku's mind reeled. Was he hallucinating? Was this what dying felt like? The sludge villain's tendril was inches from his head, descending in what felt like slow motion. "We are hungry. It is hungry. We can be strong. Together." Desperation was a powerful key. It unlocked doors that sanity and fear kept bolted shut. In that nanosecond, faced with certain death, Izuku Midoriya did the only thing he could. He didn't scream. He didn't fight it. In the deepest, most primal part of his brain, the part that screamed for survival above all else, he accepted. "Help me." The response was instantaneous. "Yes." The black ooze exploded up his arm. It wasn't a coating anymore. It was a transformation. His thin, wiry arm swelled, muscles twisting and contorting under the shifting black sheath. His skin became a glossy, living carapace. His fingers elongated, merging together before splitting apart into wicked, 5-inch claws that looked like they were carved from obsidian. The sludge tendrils slammed down. Instead of crushing his skull, it met Izuku's newly transformed arm. He had raised it on pure instinct. There was a sound like a thunderclap as the two forces met. The sludge, which had been impervious to Death Arm's punches, splattered harmlessly against the hardened black shell. Izuku stared at his own arm, at the monstrous thing it had become. He could feel it. A coursing, exhilarating power that hummed in his very bones. It was a heady, terrifying sensation, and the voice was there, purring in his mind. "Good. Now, eat." The symbiote's predatory instincts, honed over millennia, flooded Izuku's consciousness. He was no longer just a scared boy. He was a predator, and the sludge villain was prey. He felt a savage grin, not his own, stretch his lips. A low growl rumbled in his chest. With a scream that was half terror and half fury, he swung his clawed hand. He didn't just push the sludge away. He raked. The obsidian claws tore through the villain's body, leaving deep, steaming gouges. The villain shrieked, a high-pitched sound of pain and surprise. "What is this?" the villain gurgled. "What is that, boy?" Izuku didn't answer. He was barely in control. He felt his other arm, his normal human arm, reach out and grab the front of Bakugo's uniform. With a surge of unnatural strength, he ripped Bakugo free from the villain's grasp. Bakugo flew through the air, landing in a heap a safe distance away, coughing and gasping for air. He stared back at Izuku, his eyes wide with a new kind of horror. He wasn't looking at Deku. He was looking at a monster. Freed from its hostage, the sludge villain recoiled, then surged forward, its entire mass aimed at crushing the boy who had wounded it. "Foolish. We are more." The black substance surged from Izuku's arm, spreading across his chest and back. Two massive, whip-like tendrils erupted from his shoulder blades, lashing out like living bullwhips. They wrapped around the villain, squeezing tight. But they didn't just squeeze. Sharp, tooth-like barbs sprouted along their length, digging deep into the slimy flesh. The villain thrashed, but it was caught. Izuku, or the thing he was becoming, planted his feet, his human legs trembling under the strain. He felt a wave of nausea and exhilaration. His body was a vessel for this incredible, horrific power. He could feel the symbiote's intent. It wasn't just trying to win. It was trying to consume. To dominate. To destroy. "No!" Izuku gasped, his own voice sounding foreign and small. Just stop him! The voice in his head hissed with annoyance, but it seemed to listen. The tendrils didn't devour the villain. Instead, they began to whip him back and forth with incredible speed, slamming his fluid body against the pavement and the walls of the surrounding shops. The sound was like a series of wet, percussive explosions. With each impact, chunks of the villain were flung away, evaporating into foul-smelling mist. It wasn't a heroic takedown. It was a brutal, savage dismantling. It was a predator tearing its meal apart. The crowd, the heroes, everyone was silent. They were watching, paralyzed, as a schoolboy they'd seen as a victim moments before became a terrifying force of nature. With one final, mighty heave, Izuku and the symbiote swung the dwindling mass of the villain into the air, and slammed him down so hard that he burst. He didn't just disperse, he atomized, a fine green mist that coated the street before quickly evaporating into nothing. Silence. A profound, deafening silence descended upon the street, broken only by the crackle of distant fires and the sound of Izuku's own ragged, desperate breathing. He stood in the center of the street, shaking uncontrollably. The massive tendrils snaked back into his body, receding into his skin. The monstrous, clawed arm began to shrink, the black carapace melting away, leaving his normal, skinny arm, now covered in a thin layer of slimy black sweat. He was just a boy again. A boy standing in a wrecked street, covered in filth, staring at his trembling hands. Then, the world came rushing back in. The sirens. The shouting. The sudden, blinding flash of a news camera. He looked up, his eyes wide and panicked, and saw hundreds of faces staring at him, not with admiration, not with gratitude, but with a mixture of awe, confusion, and raw, undiluted fear. He saw Bakugo on the ground, pushing himself up, his expression unreadable. He saw Death Arms and Kamui Woods, their jaws hanging open, and then he saw him, standing at the edge of the police line, a plume of steam still faintly rising from his body, was All Might. He was back in his hero form, his signature smile completely absent. His face was a mask of utter, profound shock. His blue eyes, usually so full of life and confidence, were wide with disbelief, fixed solely on Izuku. He had arrived, ready to save the day, ready to unleash a Texas smash and be the symbol the world needed. He had arrived just in time to witness the entire, brutal display. He had seen the quirkless boy he had crushed on a rooftop, the boy he had dismissed as unrealistic, wield a monstrous, unknown power with a savagery that would have made most villains flinch. He saw the raw, terrifying power, and in the boy's terrified, tear-streaked face, he saw the heroic heart he had almost extinguished. All Might stared at Izuku Midoriya, the boy who had prayed for a hero and received an answer from somewhere else entirely. And in that moment, the symbol of peace had no idea what to do. The world had just changed, cracked open by a desperate boy and his dark, alien savior, and he had been too late to stop it. Or, perhaps, he had been just in time to witness its birth. The aftermath was a world drained of color. The violent oranges of Bakugo's explosions and the hellish green of the sludge villain were gone, replaced by the sterile, flashing blue and red of emergency vehicles. The world had been muted, the volume turned down to a low, anxious hum. Izuku sat on a cold, metal folding chair inside a hastily erected paramedic tent. A scratchy wool blanket was draped over his shoulders, a feeble attempt to ward off a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air and everything to do with the alien thing coiling silently in his veins. He was clean. The paramedics had checked him over, finding not a single scratch, not a bruise. They had wiped the grime from his face and hands, their expressions a mixture of professional calm and barely concealed awe. To them, he was the miracle boy, the kid who manifested a god-tier quirk at the 11th hour and saved the day. They didn't feel the cold spot in his soul. They didn't hear the whisper, "They are weak." Their concern is a mask for fear. We can smell it on them. The voice was a low rumble in the back of his mind, a bass note beneath the frantic symphony of his own thoughts. He flinched, his eyes darting around the tent as if someone might have heard. A middle-aged detective with a kind, tired face and a tan trench coat pulled up another folding chair, his knees cracking as he sat opposite Izuku. "Detective Sakachi." He introduced himself, offering a small, reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I just need to ask you a few questions for the official report, Midoriya-kun. Can you tell me what happened, in your own words? Beside him stood the pro-hero, Death Arms, his massive, rocky arms crossed over his chest. His expression wasn't kind or tired. It was tense, analytical, like a man trying to solve an impossible equation. He had seen Izuku's scrawny frame, and then he had seen the other thing. Izuku opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat was a desert. What could he say? An alien parasite that was imprisoned in a meteorite crashed in an alley and bonded with me because it liked my desperation, and now it lives in my head and wants to eat people? They wouldn't put him in the hero course. They'd put him in a containment cell. The voice slithered into the silence, cool and pragmatic. The truth is a weakness. They will not understand. They will dissect us. Tell them what they can accept. Tell them a story they want to hear. Izuku swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to his own hands, which were trembling in his lap. I don't know, he began, his voice a reedy whisper. The lie felt slick and foreign on his tongue. I saw Kaken. I saw Bakugo-kun, and the heroes couldn't. He took a shuddering breath. My legs just moved. And then, when the villain tried to hit me, it just happened. Tsukachi leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. It happened? You're referring to your quirk, I assume. The report from your middle school says you're quirkless. Tell him they were wrong, the voice insisted. They were all wrong. Useless. Deku. Make them eat the words. The anger in the voice was a potent venom, and for a terrifying second, Izuku felt it merge with his own deep-seated resentment. He clenched his fists, the memory of Bakugo's sneer and All Might's pity flashing in his mind. They were wrong, he said, his voice gaining a hard, unfamiliar edge. It was just latent. It's a transformation-type quirk. I think it's triggered by stress. Death Arms grunted. Stress? Kid, what you did out there wasn't just stress. That was annihilation. The control, the power, that doesn't just happen. Those tendrils, the claws. Have you ever manifested anything like that before? Izuku shook his head, refusing to meet the hero's gaze. No. Never. I lost control. I didn't mean for it to be so violent. I was just trying to save him. Detective Tsukachi remained silent for a long moment, his eyes searching Izuku's face. He seemed to be listening to something only he could hear. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew about Tsukachi's quirk, human lie detector. He was caught. He was done for. He's telling the truth, Tsukachi said finally, turning to Death Arms. The hero looked flabbergasted. What? Naomasa, there's no way. The raw power, he believes what he's saying is true. Tsukachi clarified, his gaze still locked on Izuku. He believes he was just trying to save his friend. He believes he lost control. The detective's eyes narrowed slightly, a glimmer of deep suspicion within them. He knew there was more to the story, but the core of Izuku's statement, his heroic intent, was registering as true. The lie about the quirk's origin, however, was clearly a gray area his power couldn't fully parse. It was a lie of omission, wrapped around a core of genuine, heartfelt truth. Clever boy, the voice purred with satisfaction. You hide the real lie inside a true feeling. We will be good partners, Tsukachi sighed, scribbling a note on his pad. The official report will state it was a case of a powerful latent quirk manifesting under extreme duress. There will be follow-up questions, counseling sessions mandated by the Hero Public Safety Commission. A quirk this powerful and volatile can't just be ignored. You understand, Midoriya-kun? Izuku nodded numbly. Counseling. Reports. He was a case file now. A curiosity. A potential threat. You're free to go, Tsukachi said, his tone softening again. Your mother is waiting just past the police line. She's been worried sick. Izuku stood on shaky legs, the wool blanket falling to the chair. He gave a small, jerky bow to the detective and the hero before turning and walking out of the tent. The flashing lights seemed to stab at his eyes. The world felt too loud, too bright. As he walked, he felt the thing inside him settle, a satisfied predator curling up after a successful hunt. He had protected their secret. He had protected them. The use of the word felt distressingly natural. The walk home was a waking dream. His mother, Inko, had enveloped him in a frantic, tearful hug that smelled of home and burnt rice. She had fussed over him, her hands checking for injuries he didn't have, her words a torrent of relief, fear, and confusion. She had seen the news. She had seen the monster. Then she had seen her son's face emerge from it. He had no answers for her, only the same strange story he'd given the detective. Now, he was in his room. His sanctuary. But it was no longer his alone. The door was closed, the familiar posters of All Might staring down at him from the walls. The hero's brilliant, unwavering smile felt different now. It felt like an accusation, a standard he had met, but in a way that would make the symbol of peace recoil in horror. He sat on the edge of his bed, his body thrumming with a strange, residual energy. He felt like a tuning fork that had just been struck. "What are you?" he whispered into the silent room. For a moment, there was no answer. Then, a thin, black tendril, no thicker than a pencil, seeped out from the cuff of his school uniform. It rose into the air, twisting and turning like a curious snake, its tip quivering as it tasted the air. "We are symbiosis," the voice resonated, clearer now in the quiet of the room. The tendril snaked forward and gently tapped the face of an all-might action figure on his desk. "We are a union. A partnership." Izuku flinched back, scrambling to the far side of his bed. "Union? You're inside me. I can feel you. It's cold." The tendril retracted slightly. "Our biology requires a host to stabilize and process nutrients on this world. Your atmosphere is rich. Your life forms are potent. Without a host, we would perish. We are a passenger. You are the vessel." "And what do I get out of it?" Izuku asked, his voice trembling. "Besides that." He gestured vaguely, thinking of the claws, the impossible strength, the brutal way they had dismantled the villain. The tendril flowed from his wrist and spread across the back of his hand, forming a sleek, black gauntlet. He could feel the strength in it, a latent power that made his own muscles feel like wet paper. "Whatever you desire," the voice said, its tone dripping with a dark allure. "You have spent your life being told you are weak. Small. Useless." The word useless was practically spat into his mind. "We heard their thoughts. We felt your pain. They were wrong. With us, you are not weak. You are not small. You are more." The symbiote was a master empath, but it didn't just sense emotion, it fed on it. It sifted through the complex layers of Izuku's psyche, finding the most potent, volatile feelings and drawing them to the surface. His deep-seated insecurity, a chasm carved by years of bullying, was the first thing it latched onto. "The blonde one," the voice hissed, the name Bakugo tasting like ash. "He hurt us. He burned our notebook. He told us to die. We remember the heat of his explosions, the smell of his contempt. He fears us now. That fear is a weapon. We could make him feel true fear. We could break him." A dark, thrilling pulse of anger, sharp and sweet, shot through Izuku. The image of Bakugo, pinned and terrified, flashed in his mind. The feeling of power, of finally being the one who was feared instead of the one who was afraid. It was intoxicating. He pushed the thought away, horrified at himself. "No! I don't want to hurt him. I want to be a hero!" The black gauntlet on his hand rippled, a sign of the creature's surprise. "A hero? You wish to protect the weak who scorned you? An inefficient use of our power." "It's not inefficient. It's what's right," Izuku insisted, his own heroic convictions rising to fight the alien pragmatism. "A hero saves people. That's all I've ever wanted. You said you'd help me. That's how you can help me." The symbiote seemed to consider this. The gauntlet receded, flowing back under his skin, leaving only the faint, cold sensation behind. "Save people," it mused. "Survival. Protecting the herd is a form of ensuring a stable food source. A grander form of survival. The logic is acceptable. Your desire to be a hero is a powerful motivator, a strong will. It will make us a potent host." "Very well," Izuku Midoriya. We will help you become a hero. Our goals are aligned. We will be strong. We will survive. We will save. Izuku let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He had set a boundary. It had listened. Maybe this could work. He was still terrified, still felt like a stranger in his own body. But for the first time since that rooftop, a tiny, warped seedling of hope began to sprout in the wasteland of his shattered dreams. He could be a hero. He just had to share his body with a bloodthirsty alien parasite to do it. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen of his computer monitor. For a split second, his reflection was wrong. The eyes were too wide, the teeth too sharp, a shadowy grin stretching his features into a predatory mask. He blinked, and it was just his own tired, scared face looking back at him. A knock on his bedroom door made him jump a foot in the air. "Izuku?" His mother's soft voice called. "There's someone here to see you. A Mr. Yagi. He says he's from Yue High School." Izuku's blood ran cold all over again. "Yue? Why?" "Careful," the voice whispered, a note of genuine caution in its tone. "This presence, it is different. It is not like the others. Be very careful." Izuku walked into the living room to find a man who looked like a walking skeleton. He was impossibly tall and thin, his clothes hanging off his bony frame. His cheekbones were sharp, his eyes sunken into dark, shadowy sockets. He looked fragile, like a gust of wind could knock him over. And yet, there was something familiar about him, the blonde, untamable tufts of hair, the piercing blue eyes. His mind connected the dots with a sickening lurch. It was All Might. The skeletal, deflated form he had seen on the rooftop. He was here. In Izuku's tiny apartment. Standing right next to the kitchen table where Izuku ate breakfast every morning. Inko Midoriya, ever the gracious host, was offering him tea, her expression a mix of confusion and deference. "Thank you, Midoriya-san, but I won't be staying long," Toshinori Yagi said, his voice a reedy version of his heroic boom. He turned his full attention to Izuku, and the boy felt pinned by that intense gaze. "Young Midoriya, we need to talk." Inko, sensing the gravity in the man's tone, gave Izuku a worried look before nervously bowing and retreating toward the kitchen. "I'll just give you two some privacy." The moment she was gone, the atmosphere in the small apartment shifted. It became heavy, charged. Toshinori's sunken eyes scanned the room, landing on the All Might merchandise that covered every available surface. A sad, ironic smile touched his thin lips. "You're quite the fan," he murmured before his expression hardened with purpose. "I won't mince words, young man. I saw what you did today. All of it. And I have questions about your Quirk." Izuku's hands began to sweat. The symbiote was a low, anxious hum in his mind. "He is the bright one. The strong one we felt from the roof. He is wounded, a dying star, but his power is immense. Do not provoke him. Maintain the lie." "It's like I told the detective," Izuku said, his voice barely a squeak. "It's a latent quirk. It came out when I was under pressure." Toshinori took a slow step closer, and despite his emaciated frame, he radiated an aura of immense power. "Don't lie to me, son. I've been a pro-hero for decades. I've seen thousands of quirks. I have never seen one manifest that way. It wasn't just power. It was sentient. It was vicious. And when I look at you, I can tell there is something else there with you. Another presence. When you fought that villain, your eyes, they weren't just your own." Izuku froze. He could see through the lie. Of course he could. This was All Might. I don't know what you're talking about," Izuku stammered, but the words were weak, flimsy. Toshinori sighed, a plume of steam escaping his lips. He looked impossibly weary, the weight of the world settled on his sharp shoulders. "Kid, listen to me. I came to this neighborhood to find you. I was going to apologize. I was going to tell you that I was wrong." Izuku's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "What I said on that rooftop, it was the logical, responsible thing to say. But it wasn't the truth. The truth is, when every pro-hero on that scene, myself included, was hesitating, waiting for the right tool for the job, you acted. You, a boy I had just been told was quirkless, were the only person who ran in. Your spirit, your drive to save someone with no thought for yourself, that was truer heroism than anything I saw today. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes. The validation, coming from the very man who had crushed him, was a painful, beautiful relief. But that power! Tashinori's voice grew grim. That power is a terrifying thing to be attached to such a noble spirit. It's a darkness, a rage that you barely seem to control. A power like that, guided only by instinct and a good heart, it's a disaster waiting to happen. It needs a guide. It needs a purpose. It needs a light to anchor it against the storm. He took another step, standing directly in front of Izuku now. The sheer intensity in his gaze made Izuku feel transparent. My Quirk, Tashinori said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The one you admire. It's not like the others. It's not something I was born with. Izuku's mind went blank. What? It is a sacred torch, passed down from one generation to the next. It is a crystallization of power, stockpiled over time, meant to fight evil. The name of this power is one for all. The name echoed in the room, filled with a sense of history and weight. Izuku could only stare, his mouth agape. The symbiote, however, reacted instantly. It had been observing, analyzing the frail man. But when he spoke of his power, it felt it. A dormant sun residing in the man's chest. A condensed nebula of pure, raw energy that dwarfed anything it had ever encountered. It was a symphony of life force, a feast beyond its wildest dreams. The star. The voice screamed in Izuku's mind, a soundless shriek of pure, avaricious desire. It is inside him. A sun contained in a dying man. Power like we have never known. Bright. Hot. We want it. We want it. The symbiote's raw hunger surged through Izuku, a wave of greed so powerful it made him dizzy. It was a primal, overwhelming need. I have been searching for a successor. All Might continued, oblivious to the psychic storm he had just unleashed. Someone with a heroic heart to whom I can pass this torch. I believe that person is you, young Midoriya. The world tilted on its axis. Izuku's legs gave out and he stumbled back, catching himself on the arm of the sofa. The whiplash was staggering. From you can't be a hero to I want you to be my successor in the span of a few hours. From quirkless reject to the chosen heir of the #1 hero. It was too much. Me? He choked out, tears finally breaking free and streaming down his cheeks. But... and what about this? He gestured to himself, to the invisible passenger he carried. Exactly. All Might said, his expression grim but resolute. That darkness inside you needs a powerful light to keep it from consuming you. One for all is the ultimate quirk of heroism. It is a power built on sacrifice and the desire to save. I am making a gamble, young Midoriya. A terrible, reckless gamble. I am betting that the light of my power, combined with your own heroic soul, will be strong enough to tame the beast you carry. I am betting that together, you can become the greatest hero of all. He held out his hand. It was a bony, fragile-looking thing, but to Izuku, it felt like the most important thing in the universe. The choice was laid bare before him. He could refuse. Live with the symbiote, try to control it on his own, forever walking a razor's edge between heroism and monstrosity. Or he could accept. He could take this incredible gift, this impossible legacy, and fuse it with the alien darkness inside him. He would become something new. Something the world had never seen before. A hero forged from the brightest light and the deepest shadow. The symbiote's voice was a frantic, desperate chant in his head. Take it. Take the power. Let us feast on the star. Take it. But beneath the creature's greed, Izuku heard All Might's words. A light to anchor it. He wasn't just being offered power. He was being offered a chance. A chance at control. A chance to truly be the hero he always dreamed of being, not just a monster who happened to be pointed in the right direction. He looked at All Might's outstretched hand, then at his own. He was Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy. He was the host, the vessel for a hungry, alien thing. And now, he was being asked to be a legend. His own trembling hand rose to meet All Might's. The tears were flowing freely now, a mixture of terror, disbelief, and overwhelming gratitude. I'll do it, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. I accept. He took All Might's hand. The contact was like grabbing a live wire. A jolt of static electricity, a promise of the immense power held in check within the man. The symbiote shrieked in delight, a feeling of pure, ecstatic triumph flooding Izuku's system. 2 souls, 1 body. Now bound by a single, impossible choice. The path forward was terrifying and unknown, but for the first time, it was a path that existed. And Izuku Midoriya was going to walk it. The Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was less a park and more a testament to humanity's casual disregard for its own environment. It was a graveyard of consumerism, where refrigerators lay half-buried like metal tombstones and mountains of discarded plastic bags whispered secrets to the salty wind. For decades, the currents had used this stretch of sand as their personal dumping ground. It was a monumental task, an impossible trash heap, and for Izuku Midoriya, it was now his classroom, his gym, and his crucible. This, Toshinori Yagi said, sweeping a skeletal arm across the vista of garbage, is your training ground. The UA entrance exam is in 10 months. Your body, as it is now, is a fragile vessel. If you were to try and inherit my power today, your limbs would pop right off. Izuku paled, his gaze drifting from a rusted-in washing machine to his own skinny arms. The image was vivid. He is not wrong, the voice in his head, the voice of the symbiote, commented with a clinical coolness. The host body is underdeveloped. Insufficient muscle mass, low bone density. It would not withstand the energy we felt from him. So, I have to clean all of this? Izuku asked, the scale of the task threatening to swallow him whole. Not just clean it, Toshinori corrected, a faint glint in his sunken eyes. You have to make your body a worthy vessel for one for all. This isn't just about strength. It's about diligence, about spirit. This is your first step on the path to becoming a hero. By restoring this coastline, you will also be restoring yourself. He then produced a meticulously detailed, multi-page workout and diet plan titled Aim to Pass, American Dream Plan. It was color-coded, cross-referenced, and utterly intimidating. It scheduled every moment of Izuku's life for the next 10 months, from the moment he woke up to the moment he collapsed into bed. Tedious, the symbiote grumbled. There are faster ways to build muscle. Let us handle it. No, Izuku whispered under his breath, earning a curious look from Toshinori. I have to do this right. The normal way. He was terrified of what would happen if he let the symbiote take over his physical development. What would he become? Would his muscles grow, or would they be replaced by something else entirely? He had to build a foundation that was his own. He had to prove, to All Might and to himself, that the boy was still in charge, not the passenger. The first few weeks were a special kind of hell. Izuku's life became a blur of aching muscles, the taste of protein powder, and the stench of decaying trash. He followed the American Dream Plan with the frantic desperation of a drowning man clinging to a life raft. He ran until his lungs burned, lifted until his arms screamed, and studied until his eyes crossed. The symbiote was an impatient and critical backseat driver. Your form is inefficient, it would comment as Izuku struggled to deadlift a rusty engine block. Angle your back differently. Engage the gluteal muscles. Fire the hamstrings in sequence. Izuku, grunting with effort, found the advice surprisingly helpful. The creature, for all its alien nature, possessed an innate and terrifyingly complete understanding of biology. It saw his body as a machine and knew precisely which levers to pull for maximum efficiency. You are fatiguing, it would note as he gasped for air during a 5-mile run on the sand. Your lactic acid levels are spiking. Your heart rate is dangerously high. Let us regulate. We can filter the blood, increase oxygen uptake. A strange, cooling sensation would spread through his chest, and his burning lungs would suddenly feel less constricted. His fatigue wouldn't vanish, but it would recede, allowing him to push for another 10, then 20 minutes past his previous limit. He was cheating, he knew, but it was a subtle cheat, a performance enhancement he could hide. The greatest temptation came during recovery. Every night, Izuku would collapse into bed, his body a single, universal ache. His muscles were shredded, his joints inflamed. Sleep was a shallow, pain-filled affair. This is inefficient, the symbiote would murmur in the darkness of his room. The healing process is too slow. The cellular regeneration is lagging. Allow us to accelerate it. Before Izuku could protest, a cool, black liquid would seem to seep through his very bones. The sharp pain of torn muscle fibers would dull into a low, warm thrum. Inflammation would recede. He could feel his body knitting itself back together at an unnatural rate. He would wake up not perfectly refreshed, but far less broken than he should have been. He was healing in 4 hours what should have taken a full day. He was terrified of this internal aid, but he couldn't deny its effectiveness. He was getting stronger, faster than Tashinori's plan had projected. He was able to pile more and more onto his training regimen, his progress startling even the number 1 hero. "My boy, your dedication is astounding!" Tashinori beamed one afternoon, watching Izuku successfully haul a small, junk-filled car onto the growing pile of cleared scrap. "You're truly taking this to heart. Plus ultra!" Izuku just managed a weak smile, his heart pounding with a secret guilt. It wasn't just his dedication. It was his secret partner, the ultimate biological steroid, working from the inside out. He was building the temple of his body, but the architect was an alien. As the months wore on, a strange rhythm developed between the two beings sharing one form. Izuku provided the will, the heroic drive, the stubborn refusal to give up. The symbiote provided the biological support, the analytical edge, the accelerated recovery. It was a partnership born of necessity, a fusion of human spirit and alien pragmatism. Izuku learned to listen to the symbiote's advice on form and breathing, treating it like an advanced AI coach. The symbiote, in turn, learned the boundaries of Izuku's stubborn morality. It learned that helping did not mean forming a massive black claw to disembowel a stubborn refrigerator. It learned that Izuku's path was one of effort and earned strength, not just instant, monstrous power. It was still impatient, still hungry, but it was also curious. It was learning about the strange, inefficient, yet incredibly potent drive that humans called spirit. Finally, the day arrived. It was the morning of the UA entrance exam. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Izuku stood atop a towering pyramid of scrap metal, and looked out at the beach. It was clean. The sand was pristine, stretching down to meet the gentle lapping of the morning tide. The sunrise reflected off the calm water, a perfect, unbroken horizon. He had done it. He had moved mountains of trash. He had transformed this forgotten place. A figure stood on the clean sand below him. Tashinori Yagi. "Oh my goodness!" Tashinori roared, his voice suddenly booming as he buffed up into his all-might form, his smile as bright as the rising sun. He whipped out his phone, snapping pictures. "You did it, my boy! You exceeded all my expectations. And in the nick of time. You are truly a worthy vessel." Izuku, standing shirtless in the morning breeze, felt a surge of pride so pure and powerful it almost brought him to tears. He looked down at himself. He was no longer the scrawny, hunched-over kid from 10 months ago. His frame was still lean, but it was corded with hard, dense muscle. A faint latticework of scars from his training crisscrossed his arms and chest. He was strong. He had done this. "We helped," the symbiote reminded him, a possessive note in its tone. Yes, Izuku thought back, a rare moment of perfect agreement. "We did." All Might beckoned him down. Izuku scrambled down the scrap heap, landing lightly on the sand before his hero. "No," All Might said, his smile softening into something more serious. "For your reward." He reached up and plucked a single strand of his golden hair. He held it out to Izuku, the gesture both ridiculous and deeply profound. "Eat this." Izuku stared. "Huh! He cannot be serious," the symbiote hissed in his mind. "The power is not in the hair. The power is a biological energy signature. This is a symbolic gesture. And a deeply unhygienic one. To inherit my power, you have to take in some of my DNA." All Might explained, completely straight-faced. "It's just how it works. Now hurry! There's no time. The exam starts in 3 hours. With a look of profound resignation, Izuku took the hair. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, staring at it as if it were a bomb. He closed his eyes, thought of his dream, and popped it into his mouth. He swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. Izuku coughed. I don't feel any different. Of course not. It has to be digested. It'll kick in soon enough. Now go, get showered, and get to that exam. Your story is just beginning, young Midoriya. As Izuku ran home, a strange warmth began to spread from his stomach. It wasn't the familiar coldness of the symbiote. This was different. It was a crackling, golden heat, like swallowing a tiny sun. The symbiote, which had been quiet, suddenly recoiled. It is here, it whispered, a new tone in its voice. Ah. And fear. The star. It is inside us now. It is vast. The warmth intensified, spreading through Izuku's bloodstream, a river of liquid sunlight. When this new energy met the alien biology of the symbiote, the reaction was not gentle. It was a collision. Izuku cried out, stumbling against the wall. A jolt, like a massive static shock, coursed through him. His vision swam with golden light. The symbiote shrieked in his mind, a sound of both agony and ecstasy. It was a foreign body, an invader in its host, but it was also the most potent energy source it had ever encountered. It didn't fight the energy. It latched onto it, drew it in, tried to absorb it. It was like a microbe trying to drink the ocean. Too much. It is too much. Izuku fell to his knees, gasping. Green, lightning-like energy, the visual signature of One for All, began to crackle across his skin. But it wasn't just green. Where the energy touched the dormant symbiote, it turned the alien's biology translucent, revealing a network of shimmering, black veins beneath his skin. The green lightning traveled along these black pathways, supercharging them. The pain was immense. It felt like his very cells were being ripped apart and rewritten. He was a battlefield, the site of an impossible fusion between a stockpile of human power and a predatory alien lifeform. And then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. The light faded. The pain receded to a low, powerful hum. Izuku was left kneeling in an alleyway, panting, his shirt soaked with sweat. He felt different. He felt a universe of power thrumming just beneath his skin, a sleeping god in his blood. And intertwined with it, coiling around it, was the familiar, cold presence of his partner. The symbiote was no longer just a passenger. It was a conduit. A living, breathing amplifier for the new power that now resided in them. We are one, the symbiote breathed, its voice shaky but filled with a newfound reverence. We are glorious. The 10 months of brutal physical training were one thing. The next few hours of trying to control the cataclysmic power now raging inside him were another entirely. Izuku barely made it through his shower, terrified a stray thought might cause him to punch a hole through his apartment building. He got dressed, ate a piece of toast that tasted like ash, and made his way to the UA campus, his mind a maelstrom. He had to get a handle on this. All Might had warned him about his limbs popping off with the quirk alone. What would happen now that it was being funneled through an alien lifeform that craved power above all else? He needed to test it. Just once. Before the exam, he found a secluded spot on the beach, far from where All Might was probably still taking selfies. He faced the ocean, the same ocean he had just saved. He took a deep breath, mimicking his mentor's stance. Okay, he whispered. All Might said to clench my butt and yell smash from the bottom of my heart. This is a foolishly simplistic approach to channeling bioenergy, the symbiote commented dryly. But let us try it his way first. Izuku focused, trying to draw on that wellspring of power. He felt the golden warmth surge from his core, traveling up his torso and down his right arm. It was wild, untamed, a roaring inferno. His arm began to glow, red veins appearing as his body struggled to contain the energy. It was too much. It was going to break him. No. Not like this, the symbiote intervened, its instinct for self-preservation kicking into high gear. It couldn't let its host destroy itself. We will contain it. We will give it form. Before Izuku could even think, the familiar black ooze erupted from his skin. But this time, it was different. It didn't just coat his arm. It molded itself, hardened, intertwined with the overflowing energy of One for All. It formed a monstrous shell around his limb, a gauntlet of shifting, organic armor. It was black as pitch, but shimmering green lines, like circuitry, pulsed all over it, tracing the flow of OFA's power. His fingers elongated into thick, brutal-looking claws. The symbiote wasn't just protecting him from the power, it was shaping it, focusing it. What is this? Izuku breathed, staring at the terrifying and beautiful thing his arm had become. A focusing lens. A biological weapon. Now, release it. Izuku screamed, a cry of effort and terror, and threw the punch. Smash! He wasn't aiming at a refrigerator. He was aiming at the air above the water. The result was apocalyptic. The force of the punch didn't just create a gust of wind. It created a shockwave. The air itself seemed to compress, and then explode outwards. A colossal cannonball of pure kinetic force slammed into the surface of the ocean. The water erupted, a geyser rocketing 50 feet into the air. The shockwave continued, carving a deep, frothing trench in the water that stretched for hundreds of yards before finally dissipating. The resulting wave slapped back against the shore with the force of a storm surge, and the sound, a deafening, world-shattering crack boom, shattered windows in a building a full block away from the beach. Izuku was thrown backward by the recoil, landing hard on the sand. His ears were ringing. His arm, now back to normal, was completely unharmed. Not a broken bone. Not a scratch. The symbiote had absorbed and vented the entire backlash. He stared, shaking, at the churning chaos he had just unleashed on the peaceful ocean. All Might's punch blew away a fridge. That had felt like it could have leveled a building. The power was exponentially greater than he had anticipated. And far, far less controlled. Yes, the symbiote purred, a sound of deep, predatory satisfaction. This is good. This is very good. We are power. Izuku felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a hero's power. This was a weapon of mass destruction. A weapon is a tool, the symbiote countered, sensing his fear. A scalpel can be used to kill or to heal. It is the intent of the wielder that matters. Your intent is to be a hero. We will be a hero's weapon. Izuku pushed himself to his feet, his mind racing. He had to control this. He couldn't unleash this kind of power in the exam. He'd kill someone. He'd destroy the entire testing site. We need a name, he said suddenly, the thought coming out of nowhere. A name? We are us. You are Izuku Midoriya. I am me. No, Izuku insisted, looking at his hands. When we're like that, together, we need a name. For the hero. The symbiote sifted through the data it had absorbed from Izuku's mind, from the news reports, from the ambient noise of the city. It searched for concepts related to power and identity. I heard the news reports call the slime creature a villain. They used the word to describe its fluid body. Venomous. I like the sound of this word. Venom. It speaks of poison, of a single, potent strike. No! Izuku recoiled instantly. That's a villain's name. It's dark, it's scary. We can't be called Venom. The symbiote felt a flicker of annoyance. It is an accurate descriptor of our potential. I don't care. I want to save people, not scare them to death. The name has to mean something else. It has to represent us. Both of us. He thought for a moment, his gaze distant. You're a voice in my head. I'm a voice to you. When we work together, it's like two voices speaking as one. An echo of each other's will. Echo, the symbiote tested the word. It was less visceral than venom. It lacked the predatory bite. But it was not entirely inaccurate. It described their union, their resonance. It was a compromise. Echo. It is acceptable. For the public. For the hero. Izuku could feel a private reservation in the symbiote's tone, but in the heat of battle, it added a dark, private promise just for Izuku. When the blood is hot and the hunger rises, in my heart, I will still be Venom. A shiver ran down Izuku's spine. Echo. He would be the hero Echo. But he would always carry Venom inside him. He had just 10 months to learn how to be a hero. He suspected he had a lifetime to learn how to tame a monster. He looked at his watch. His eyes widened in panic. I'm going to be late. He took off running, his newly superpowered legs eating up the ground at an incredible pace. He was heading for UA High. He was heading for his dream, and he was bringing a passenger who viewed the whole thing as a glorious, all-you-can-eat buffet. The gates of UA High were even more impressive in person. They were a towering testament to progress and power, a symbolic threshold between the mundane world and the extraordinary one Izuku had bled and sweat for 10 months to enter. Students from all over the country milled about, a vibrant, chattering sea of nervous energy and barely concealed ambition. Each one was a unique story, a unique quirk, a unique dream, and none of them, Izuku knew with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, were remotely like him. He walked through the gates, his gait subtly different from the shy, hunched posture of his past. The 10 months of grueling training had straightened his spine. The constant, quiet presence of the symbiote had given him a new awareness of his surroundings. He didn't just see the crowd, he sensed it. The symbiote offered a low, continuous stream of data, a predator's analysis of the herd. The girl with the pink skin radiates high levels of kinetic potential and chemical corrosives. The boy with the multi-jointed arms has low energy output but extreme physical adaptability. The loud one with the engines in his calves, he is fast. Very fast. It was overwhelming, like trying to listen to 100 radio stations at once. Izuku mentally pushed back, trying to quiet the voice. I need to focus on me, not them. Their abilities are relevant to our survival in the coming tests, the symbiote, ever the pragmatist, retorted. Knowledge is power. Izuku was so caught up in his internal argument that he didn't see the crack in the pavement. His foot caught, and he pitched forward, a sudden, mortifying stumble toward the unforgiving concrete. Classic Deku, a bitter part of his brain thought. He never hit the ground. A gentle pressure enveloped him, and he found himself floating, suspended an inch from the pavement. He looked over his shoulder to see a girl with a round, cheerful face and a permanent rosy blush on her cheeks. She had touched his backpack. Whoa, you okay? She asked, her voice bright and friendly. She touched her fingertips together. Release. Izuku landed softly on his feet. Oh. Thank you. I'm sorry, I should have watched where I was going. I was just so nervous, and the gates are so big, and everyone seems so confident, and, hey, it's all good. She laughed, cutting off his frantic muttering. Super nerve-wracking, right? I'm totally freaking out. Getting tripped up is probably a good way to break the ice. Or the pavement. She smiled, and for a moment, the world felt normal. She was just a nice girl, nervous like him. Her heart rate is elevated, but her pheromone output indicates low aggression, the symbiote noted clinically. She poses no immediate threat. Her quirk manipulates gravitational properties via physical contact, a significant weakness. The cold, analytical observation clashed so violently with the girl's warm presence that Izuku flinched. The duality of his existence was a stark, jarring reality. He was having a normal human interaction, while the alien in his head was calculating how to best neutralize a potential threat. I'm Uraraka Achiko, she said, offering a hand. Midoriya Izuku, he replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm. He tried to offer a genuine smile, but he felt a strange intensity emanating from him, a dark aura he couldn't quite suppress. Uraraka's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, her eyes widening slightly as if she'd felt a sudden chill. She saw something in his gaze, a depth that was unsettling. Well, good luck in there, Midoriya-kun, she said, pulling her hand back a little too quickly. She gave a quick wave and hurried inside. Izuku watched her go, a familiar pang of isolation hitting him. He'd barely said a word and he'd already weirded her out. He was different now. Not just powerful, but other. A quiet intensity clung to him like a shroud, a byproduct of the constant, silent conversation in his head and the predatory nature of his passenger. Other kids had quirks. He had a co-pilot who thought in terms of threats and weaknesses. Her reaction is logical, the symbiote stated. Prey animals are naturally wary of predators. Our combined presence is potent. They can sense that we are not like them. This is an advantage. It doesn't feel like an advantage, Izuku thought grimly as he headed inside. The written exam was a breeze. Izuku's mind, already analytical, was now enhanced by the symbiote's rapid data processing. He tore through the questions, his pencil flying across the page. The physical exam, however, was where the real test would lie. They were all gathered in a massive auditorium, the lights dimming as the voice hero, Present Mike, exploded onto the stage. He launched into a high-energy, ridiculously loud explanation of the practical exam. They would be sent into a massive, cityscape replica and would have to fight giant robots worth different point values. 3 types of Villabots in every battle center. You earn points based on their difficulty level. Your goal, listeners, is to use your quirk to rack up a heroic pile of points. As President Mike yelled, Izuku's mind was racing. Okay, a combat test. I can't use the smash. It's too powerful. It would destroy everything, and I might hurt someone. I need a different application. Something controlled. The small ones are weak, the symbiote whispered, its focus absolute. Their armor is thin. We do not need the star power for them. Our own strength will be sufficient. We can pierce, crush, and dismantle. The larger ones will require more finesse. A tall, well-built young man with glasses stood up, his hand chopping the air with rigid precision. Excuse me, sir. A question. On the printout, there are 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, it is a disgrace for a top-tier institution like UA High. And you, with the curly green hair. He suddenly swiveled, pointing directly at Izuku. You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave. The spotlight effect was instantaneous. Hundreds of eyes turned to Izuku. He shrank in his seat, his face burning with humiliation. This one is loud and posturing, the symbiote hissed with disdain. He uses rigid formality to mask his own anxiety. His power appears to be located in his legs. He is all straight lines. We are curves. We can break him easily. Stop it! Izuku mentally snapped, his embarrassment warring with the symbiote's aggressive assessments. President Mike calmed the student, Ida Tenya, Izuku would later learn, and explained that the 4th robot was a 0-pointer, an obstacle to be avoided. A gimmick. Avoid? The symbiote's curiosity was piqued. An obstacle with no reward. An interesting psychological test. They wish to see if we will waste energy on a pointless target. We will not. We will be efficient. We will hunt. Soon, they were bussed to their designated battle centers. Izuku found himself at Battle Center B, standing before another set of colossal gates. He recognized Uraraka from the entrance, as well as the loud boy Ida. He tried to give Uraraka a reassuring nod, but she, along with everyone else, was focused on the gates, their game faces on. The air crackled with anticipation. Izuku took a deep breath, trying to center himself. He could feel the symbiote, a coiled spring of potential in his cells, eager to be let loose. All right, go! President Mick's voice blared from hidden speakers. Everyone looked around, confused. What's the hold-up? There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! 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 The massive gates slid open, and the other examinees shot forward like cannonballs. Ida was a blue blur, his engines roaring to life. Uraraka was already sprinting. Izuku was left standing in the dust for a split second, his mind catching up. He broke into a run, his symbiote-enhanced muscles propelling him forward with incredible speed. He easily caught up to the pack, his movements fluid and silent. He wasn't just running, he was flowing. The cityscape was a chaotic battlefield. Robots, ranging from scorpion-like 1-pointers to tank-like 3-pointers, swarmed the streets. Explosions and shouts echoed off the fake buildings. Students were already engaging, showing off their flashy quirks. A boy with a laser in his navel blasted a 2-pointer. A spiky-haired kid hardened his body to shatter another. Izuku rounded a corner and came face to face with the 1-pointer. It lunged, its metallic claws screeching. Izuku didn't even think. He didn't use one for all. He let the symbiote have a taste. His right arm morphed, the black substance flowing out to form not a massive, monstrous claw, but a sleek, sharp blade, like a giant obsidian scalpel. He ducked under the robot's lunge and, with a single, elegant motion, severed its hydraulic legs. The robot crashed to the ground, sparking and inert. 1 point, the symbiote noted, a flicker of satisfaction running through Izuku. efficient. Minimal energy expenditure. More. He didn't just fight. He hunted. He moved through the urban jungle with a predatory grace that was utterly unnerving. While other students were engaged in head-on, power-blasting confrontations, Izuku was a shadow. He used the alleyways, the rooftops. He would drop onto robots from above, his hands morphing into heavy, mace-like fists to crush their CPU casings. He would use thin, whip-like tendrils to ensnare them from the shadows, tripping them and then piercing their power cores with a hardened spike. He dismantled the three-pointer by liquefying his hand, pouring it into the robot's joints, and then solidifying it, locking the machine up completely before tearing it apart from the inside. It was silent. It was brutal. It was terrifyingly effective. He wasn't yelling, "Smash!" He was whispering, "Got you." He was racking up points at an astonishing rate, but he wasn't drawing any attention to himself. He was a ghost in the machine, a whisper of black death that left a trail of deactivated robots in its wake. He was being so efficient that other students would round a corner to find a veritable scrapyard of robots, with no clue who had taken them down. 45 points, the symbiote calculated. Sufficient for a passing grade, based on the projected average. We could stop now and conserve energy. No, Izuku thought, his adrenaline high. I need to prove I belong here. More. He was about to seek out another target when the ground began to tremble. A low, grinding rumble echoed through the city, growing louder and louder. A shadow fell over the street, vast and absolute. Izuku looked up. And up. And up. The zero-pointer. It was bigger than he could have imagined. Taller than the tallest skyscraper in the battle center, a monolithic titan of green metal and blinking red lights. Its colossal hand scraped against the side of a building as it moved, sending a shower of concrete and glass raining down on the street below. It was an obstacle, a force of nature designed to intimidate and scatter. And it was working. Students who had been fighting with bravado moments before were now screaming and running in the opposite direction. "It's the zero-pointer! Run for your lives!" It was a perfectly rational response. The machine was a pointless, dangerous waste of time. Izuku turned to run as well. That was the smart thing to do. Good. Strategic retreat, the symbiote approved. There is no value in this target. Then he heard a cry. Oof! He glanced back. A pile of rubble, dislodged by the robot's passage, had trapped someone. It was the nice girl. Uraraka. Her leg was pinned beneath a massive slab of concrete. She was struggling, her face pale with pain and panic, as the zero-pointer's colossal shadow loomed over her. The world stopped. All the calculations, all the points, all the strategy, it all evaporated. All that was left was a girl in trouble. A hero's instinct, purer and more powerful than any alien pragmatism, took over. She's going to be crushed. Her survival is irrelevant to our score, the symbiote stated coldly. She is a competitor. Her failure increases our chance of success. Leave her. The cold logic was so inhuman, so antithetical to everything Izuku stood for, that it sparked a fire in his soul. No! He whispered aloud, his voice a low growl. He turned to face the oncoming titan. She helped me. I'm going to help her. That's what a hero does. His decision was a psychic thunderclap. The symbiote felt his unwavering, selfless resolve, the same incandescent will it had first sensed during the sludge villain incident. It was an illogical, inefficient, self-destructive impulse. And it was the most powerful thing the symbiote had ever encountered. It sighed in his mind, a sound of resigned frustration. This host is problematic. Very well. If we must engage the pointless target, let us engage it properly. But the star power, it is too much, too destructive. Let us show you what we can do. Izuku didn't have time to argue. The robot's massive fist, the size of a small house, was beginning its descent toward Uraraka. He broke into a sprint, not away, but directly toward the zero-pointer. He channeled the symbiote, letting it surge, not just into one limb, but throughout his entire body. His feet changed, the black substance forming a gripping, clawed texture that allowed him to get purchase on the broken asphalt. He ran up a pile of rubble and leaped. It was an impossible leap, carrying him 30, 40, 50 feet into the air. He landed on the zero-pointer's leg, his symbiote-coated fingers digging into the metal plating like pitons into rock. He began to climb. He wasn't using one for all's explosive power. He was using the symbiote's raw, predatory strength and agility. He moved like a spider, scaling the colossal metal titan with terrifying speed. His arms and legs were coated in the shifting black carapace. His hands and feet transformed into multi-taloned claws that screeched as they gouged paths in the robot's armor. The other students, fleeing for their lives, stopped and stared. They saw a figure, small and black, scaling the zero-pointer with an inhuman speed that defied gravity. It was a monstrous, awe-inspiring sight. Higher! The symbiote urged, its own predatory excitement building. The head. The power source and primary sensor cluster will be in the head. Izuku reached the robot's torso, then its shoulder. He could see the head now, a massive block of metal with a single, glowing red optic. He gathered his strength and leaped one last time, landing squarely on the robot's face. He looked down. He could see Uraraka, a tiny, helpless figure below. He could see the other students, frozen in shock. He could see Ida, his jaw slack with disbelief. This was his moment. Not just to save someone, but to make a statement. He didn't rear back for a punch. He let the symbiote have full control of his arms. They swelled and morphed, transforming into two colossal, wicked-looking claws, each easily 10 feet long. They were masses of hardened, organic muscle and obsidian-sharp edges. With a roar that was a fusion of a boy's desperate cry and an alien predator's hunting snarl, he plunged the claws into the robot's head. The sound of screeching, tearing metal was deafening. He wasn't punching it. He was gutting it. He tore through the outer armor, the inner circuitry, the power conduits. Sparks flew like fireworks. He dug deeper, his claws ripping and shredding the machine from the inside out. He felt the central power core, a pulsating sphere of energy. He closed his claws around it and crushed. The zero-pointer's red eye flickered and died. The colossal body shuddered, its joints locking up. For a moment, it hung there, a dead titan suspended against the sky. Then, with a groan of protesting metal, it began to fall. Izuku was still on its face. The symbiote's battle lust faded, replaced by the stark realization of their imminent, high-velocity meeting with the ground. This was poorly calculated, the symbiote admitted. No kidding! Izuku thought, his heart leaping into his throat. He was about to be crushed by his own victory. And then he remembered her. Uraraka. He had saved her, but she was still down there. He had to get to her. He used the last of his strength to push off the falling robot's face, launching himself toward her. He tucked and rolled in midair, the symbiote forming a thin, shock-absorbent layer around him. He hit the ground hard, but not hard enough to break anything, tumbling in a shower of gravel a few feet from the girl. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the ache in his body. The zero-pointer was crashing down right behind them, a metal avalanche that would bury them both. He ran to Uraraka, his mind a blank panic. He couldn't lift the concrete slab. Not in time, but she could. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and amazement. She looked from Izuku to the falling robot and slapped her hand onto the massive piece of concrete pinning her leg. Release! She yelled not at him, but at her own power. And then she slapped the back of Izuku's symbiote-laced uniform. A strange, weightless sensation enveloped them both. The massive concrete slab floated harmlessly into the air. Izuku, now unbound by gravity, grabbed Uraraka's arm and kicked off the ground. They floated up and away, a desperate, graceful arc, just as the zero-pointer crashed down where they had been seconds before. The impact shook the entire city block, sending up a plume of dust and debris that blotted out the sun. They floated gently back to the ground a safe distance away. Uraraka immediately doubled over, looking nauseous. Okay, max capacity, definitely gonna be sick. The final buzzer blared through the dust-filled air, signaling the end of the exam. Silence descended, thick and heavy. Izuku stood panting, the black symbiote receding back under his skin, leaving only his tattered gym uniform. He looked at Uraraka, who was staring at him, her previous unease now replaced with wide-eyed, breathless awe. He looked at the other students, who were slowly emerging from their hiding places, their faces pale with shock. They weren't looking at him like he was a competitor. They were looking at him like he was a monster. A monster that had just saved one of them. He had gotten 0 points for his most heroic act. But he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he had passed the real test. In a darkened monitoring room deep within the UA campus, a group of pro-heroes watched the replays on a massive screen. The mood was somber. "He has incredible power," the R-rated hero, Midnight, murmured. "But the application, it's so brutal. He moved like a creature hunting prey," the lanky hero, Ectoplasm, added. "Precise, efficient, and utterly without mercy for the machines." Nizu, the principal, a small, white-furred creature who was either a mouse, a dog, or a bear, sipped his tea, his black eyes fixed on the screen. He replayed the footage of the 0-pointer takedown, slowing it down. He watched the monstrous claws tear the robot apart. "It is not a single quirk," he said finally, his voice chipper but edged with steel. "Observe. The initial takedown showed no signs of the raw power All Might is known for. It was a purely biological, transformative ability. But the boy himself, he carries the signature of One for All. It's faint dormant, like he hasn't learned to use it yet. But it is there." All Might, in his skeletal form, stood in the corner of the room, his face grim. "He was supposed to use One for All. I told him to. But he couldn't control it. So he relied on the other thing." The homeroom teacher for the future Class 1A, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a year, Shota Aizawa, spoke up, his voice a tired drawl. "So we have a kid with 2 quirks? One, the most powerful energy stockpiling quirk in history, and the other, an unknown transformative type that acts like a sentient predator? And he's a first year?" He let out a long, weary sigh. "This is giving me a headache." "Indeed," Nizu chirped, a dangerous glint in his eye. "It is a fascinating puzzle." The boy scored an incredible 77 points on the villain bots, the highest score in years, but his true merit was shown when he scored 0. He switched the screen to show Izuku shielding Uraraka. He abandoned a winning strategy, risked his own life, and faced an insurmountable obstacle to save a fellow examinee. He has the power of a monster, the mind of a strategist, and the heart of a true hero. A volatile and unpredictable combination. Aizawa's eyes narrowed as he watched the footage. "He's a problem. A variable we can't control. Power like that, if it turns, he could be more dangerous than any villain." He pushed a button on the console in front of him. A new window popped up, showing a file. The name read Midoriya Izuku. "Let him in," Aizawa said, his voice flat. "Put him in my class. I'll be the one to watch him. And if he can't prove that he can control that monstrous power, and be a hero, I'll be the one to crush his dream and expel him. It's the only logical way to handle a risk this big." All Might said nothing, but a deep sense of dread and a flicker of desperate hope warred within him. He had unleashed this. Now, all he could do was pray he hadn't made a terrible mistake. The first few days at UA High were a surreal dream from which Izuku expected to wake at any moment. He was here. He was actually here, sitting in Class 1A, surrounded by the most promising hero candidates of his generation. The homeroom teacher, Mr. Aizawa, was a perpetually exhausted man who seemed to live in a yellow sleeping bag, and the curriculum was a whirlwind of heroics, training, and regular high school subjects that felt comically mundane by comparison. Yet, despite living his ultimate fantasy, Izuku felt a profound sense of isolation. He was an island in the middle of a bustling classroom. His classmates kept their distance. They had all seen the footage from the entrance exam. They had seen the monstrous, inhuman way he'd scaled the 0-pointer and torn it apart. They had heard the whispers about the new kid with the terrifying, unknown quirk. They would talk to him, of course, with a strained politeness, but their eyes always held a flicker of wary apprehension. He was a curiosity, a walking power keg they weren't sure how to approach. Uraraka was the friendliest, often trying to include him, but even she seemed to hesitate, as if recalling the unsettling chill she'd felt when they first met. And then there was Bakugo. Katsuki Bakugo was a storm cloud of simmering fury. He had made it into UA, as expected, but his victory was tainted. He was not the undisputed king he had always envisioned himself to be. He had been saved by Deku. Saved by the quirkless, worthless Deku who had suddenly manifested a power so monstrous it defied comprehension. It was an insult to his entire existence. He refused to look at Izuku, refused to acknowledge him. But Izuku could feel the weight of his glare, a constant, burning pressure at the back of his neck. It wasn't the familiar glare of a bully looking down on his victim. It was the glare of a rival trying to understand a weapon that had been pointed at him, a weapon he couldn't possibly hope to match. The symbiote, of course, relished it. He remembers, it would purr in the quiet moments of class. He remembers being helpless. He remembers our power. He fears us. Good. Fear is the beginning of respect. That's not respect, Izuku would argue in the silent confines of his mind. It's just fear. I don't want him to be afraid of me. Why? The symbiote would ask with genuine, alien confusion. Fear is a tool. It prevents conflict. It establishes dominance. It ensures survival. His fear keeps him from attacking us as he did when we were weak. It is efficient. This cold, predatory logic was a constant companion, a dark whisper that colored every interaction. Izuku tried to suppress it, to focus on All Might's lessons and the dream of being a hero, but the voice was always there, a second soul intertwined with his own. The tension finally came to a head during the second day of school, in a class taught by the number one hero himself. I am here! All Might boomed, bursting into the classroom in his Silver Age costume, his presence filling the room with an almost overwhelming aura of charisma. Coming through the door like a hero! The class erupted in excited gasps and fanboy/fangirl squeals. For a moment, even Izuku felt a surge of pure, uncomplicated joy. This was his mentor, his idol, the man who had given him this chance. Welcome to the most important class at UA High. Hero Basic Training. Today, we'll be jumping right in with this. All Might struck a dramatic pose, holding up a card that read Battle. The Trial of Battle! He gestured to the wall, and numbered cases slid out, containing their hero costumes. The excitement in the room became electric. As Izuku went to retrieve his case, number 17, he felt the symbiote's curiosity spike. A uniform? A second skin? Interesting. What have you designed? Izuku's costume was a reflection of his own heroic, slightly nerdy heart. It was a simple, full-body teal jumpsuit with white gloves and boots, a red belt, and a mask with a wide, toothy grin and long, antenna-like ears. It was a clear, if somewhat awkward, homage to All Might. He had designed it years ago, a dream for a quirkless boy. Now, it felt inadequate. The design is sentimental, the symbiote commented, its tone a mixture of clinical analysis and faint disappointment. The material offers minimal ballistic protection. The color is highly visible, a tactical disadvantage. And the ears serve no function. It is a child's drawing. It's my drawing, Izuku thought defensively, a blush creeping up his neck. We can improve it, the symbiote offered. We are the only armor you need. But a shell, a persona, this echo requires a face. Let us make some adjustments. When Class 1A assembled at Ground Beta, a sprawling cityscape for their training exercise, they were a vibrant spectacle of heroic creativity. From Todoroki's practical, half-frozen suit to Uraraka's sleek, pink and black astronaut-themed costume, everyone looked the part. Then came Izuku. He was the last one to emerge from the tunnel, and a hush fell over the group. His costume was different from the drawing. The base was still there, the teal jumpsuit, the red belt, but it had been altered. The fabric seemed to cling to his newly muscular frame, and faint, black, vein-like lines, almost invisible unless the light hit them just right, traced patterns across the material. The gloves were no longer plain white. They were tipped with a glossy, black material that looked as hard as obsidian. But the most striking change was the mask. The wide, toothy grin was still there, but it looked less like a smile and more like a predator's bared teeth. A thin, black, bioorganic layer seemed to have fused with the mask's interior, giving it a subtle, unnerving depth. The long, rabbit-like ears were gone. In their place were two shorter, more swept-back fins, reminiscent of a bat's ears, giving him a sleeker, more predatory silhouette. It was still recognizable as All Might's influence, but it was a darker, more dangerous reflection. Whoa, Midoriya, cool costume, Kirishima said, though his wide grin was a little strained. Looks intense. Izuku just gave a nervous nod, feeling self-conscious. The symbiote had subtly altered the costume as he put it on, flowing into the fabric, reinforcing it, reshaping it. It was more comfortable, more flexible, and he could feel a thin, protective layer of the symbiote just under the cloth, ready to harden at a moment's notice. It felt less like clothes and more like a second skin. His first skin. All Might, trying to ignore the deeply unsettling aura his successor was now projecting, explained the exercise. It would be a 2-on-2, indoor battle. One team of heroes would have to infiltrate a building and either capture the two villains or secure a mock nuclear weapon. The villain team would have to protect the weapon or capture the heroes. And now, let's draw the teams! All Might boomed, pulling balls from a lottery box. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. Team A, Izuku Midoriya and Achiko Uraraka. Team D, Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. And the first matchup would be Team A as the heroes versus Team D as the villains. A cold dread washed over Izuku. He looked over at Bakugo. The blonde boy wasn't scowling. He was grinning. A wide, manic, utterly terrifying grin. His eyes were locked on Izuku, and they burned with a furious, triumphant light. This wasn't an exercise for him. This was the rematch he had been craving. This was his chance to prove that whatever monstrous power Deku had, it was nothing compared to his own genius, his own strength. Uraraka-san, Izuku said, his voice low as they studied the building's floor plan. Bakugo, he's going to come for me. He's not going to guard the weapon. His pride won't let him. He'll treat this as a one-on-one fight from the start. He is correct, the symbiote affirmed. The blonde one's emotional state is a torrent of rage, pride, and inferiority. He is highly predictable. He will seek to neutralize us first to re-establish his perceived dominance. Uraraka looked at Izuku, her brow furrowed with concern. You seem very sure about that. I've known him my whole life. Izuku replied, his gaze distant. His goal isn't to win the exercise. It's to beat me. So what's the plan? She asked, trusting his assessment. You're the hero who secures the objective, Izuku said, his eyes hardening with a resolve she hadn't seen before. Your quirk is perfect for stealth and mobility. Find the weapon. I'll be the hero who runs interference. I'll keep Kaken busy. Busy? The symbiote's voice was a low, dangerous hiss in his mind. He is a threat. Threats are not to be kept busy. They are to be eliminated. He made us feel weak. He tried to burn our knowledge. He told us to die. This is not a game. This is retribution. A dark, cold anger, potent and sharp, flooded Izuku's system. It was the symbiote's rage, but it latched onto his own 14 years of repressed resentment, his own memories of pain and humiliation, the explosions, the laughter, the casual cruelty. For a moment, the two angers became one. No, Izuku fought back, clutching his fists. This is a training exercise. We're heroes. We don't eliminate threats. We subdue them. Subdual is a temporary state, the symbiote argued. Elimination is permanent. More efficient. We do this my way, Izuku insisted, his will a bulwark against the alien's predatory logic. We win the exercise. But we don't break him. The symbiote fell silent, but it was a tense, grudging silence. A predator being told to play with its food. The buzzer sounded. The battle began. Izuku and Uraraka slipped into the building through a ground-floor window. The interior was a maze of concrete hallways and stark, empty rooms. It was unnervingly quiet. He's coming, Izuku whispered, his senses unnaturally sharp. He could feel the faint vibrations in the floor, hear the distant scrape of a boot on concrete. The symbiote gave him more. It extended a microscopic, thread-like sensor from his fingertip, tasting the air currents. He is around the next corner. Alone. The one with the engines is on the 5th floor, with the objective. As we predicted. The blonde one is coming fast. Ambush posture. Get ready. Izuku breathed to Uraraka. They reached a crossroads in the hallway. Without warning, Bakugo exploded from around the corner. It wasn't a tentative probe. It was a full-blown assault, a massive, right-hook explosion aimed directly at where Izuku's head would have been. "Deku!" he roared, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. But Izuku wasn't there. Guided by the symbiote's precognitive-like sense of danger, he had already moved. He dropped low, the explosion roaring over his head, its heat searing the air. He moved with a fluid, inhuman grace, a blur of motion that Bakugo's eyes could barely track. He came up behind Bakugo, not attacking, just observing. Bakugo spun around, another explosion already popping in his palm. "Stand and fight, you coward! I'm not fighting you, Kaken!" Izuku said, his voice unnervingly calm. The symbiote was filtering his adrenaline, keeping him perfectly level-headed, a predator in its element. "This is a team exercise. Don't you dare look down on me!" Bakugo screamed, launching himself forward in a series of powerful, arcing explosions. He was a whirlwind of destruction, blasting chunks out of the concrete walls, filling the hallway with smoke and the smell of nitroglycerin. But it was like trying to hit smoke. Izuku flowed around every attack. A black, slick coating of the symbiote covered his boots, allowing him to slide across the floor with frictionless grace. He weaved and dodged, letting Bakugo's rage-fueled attacks spend themselves against empty air. In the command room, the rest of Class 1A watched, stunned. "Whoa, Midori is fast!" Sero commented. "He's not just fast," Todoroki noted, his gaze analytical and intense. "He's not even trying. He's anticipating every move Bakugo makes." All Might watched, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. This wasn't the heroic brawling he expected. This was something else. A predator toying with its prey. Back in the hallway, Izuku began to speak. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through Bakugo's roaring explosions with surgical precision. "You always lead with a big right hook, Kaken. It's your signature move. But it leaves you wide open for a counterattack for 0.8 seconds, Bakugo faltered, his eyes widening. How did he know that? Izuku dodged another blast. "Your AP shot is powerful, but you have to narrow your focus to aim it, giving you tunnel vision. You can't track peripheral movement when you're about to use it." "Shut up!" Bakugo yelled, his movements becoming more frantic, more sloppy. "All your moves, all your strategies. I've been watching you my whole life." Izuku continued, his voice a cold, flat monotone. He was a ghost, a shadow that Bakugo couldn't touch. "I wrote it all down, hero analysis for the future. Remember? The book you burned and threw out a window." The words struck Bakugo like a physical blow. "You called me a pebble on the side of the road," Izuku whispered, his face emerging from the smoke, his expression unreadable behind his mask. "A useless, quirkless Deku. You told me to take a swan dive off the roof of a building." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking at the core of Bakugo's pride, his guilt, his rage. Yes, the symbiote purred, savoring the moment. Dismantle his spirit. Break his will. Show him what true power is. Make him remember his words. Make him choke on them. "Uraraka-san," Izuku said into his comms, never taking his eyes off the now hesitating Bakugo. Now, on the 5th floor, Uraraka, who had been creeping toward the objective, made her move. Ida, in his villainous persona, was caught completely off guard. Bakugo heard Ida's surprised yell over his own comms. He was being played. Deku wasn't just dodging, he was stalling. He was treating him, Katsuki Bakugo, like a mindless obstacle. The humiliation was a burning fire. "That's it!" he roared, his fury reaching a fever pitch. He raised his gauntlets. "You look down on me, you damn nerd? I'm an elite, and I'll prove it by blasting you to bits." He reached for the pin on his gauntlet. "Bakugo, my boy, stop!" All Might's voice yelled over the PA system. "You'll kill him! He won't die if he dodges!" Bakugo screamed, and pulled the pin. A colossal, building-shaking explosion erupted from his gauntlet, a focused beam of destructive power that tore up the entire hallway. It wasn't an attack, it was an act of annihilation. Izuku was at ground zero. There was no way to dodge something that destroyed the entire corridor. For a terrifying split second, Bakugo felt a surge of triumph, immediately followed by a cold wave of horror. Did I kill him? The smoke cleared. The hallway was a crater. But Izuku was still standing there. He hadn't dodged. He had taken it. He was encased, from head to toe, in a cocoon of shimmering, shifting black. It wasn't the sleek, heroic suit from before. This was something else. A creature of raw, organic armor, bulky and monstrous. The blast had torn away part of the shell on his shoulder, revealing not wounded flesh, but a writhing mass of black tendrils that were already knitting themselves back together, healing the damage in real time. The head of the creature slowly turned. The mask was gone. In its place was a horrific, elongated face. Two huge, jagged white eye patches, like a spider's markings, were set in a featureless black head. And then, the face split open, peeling back to reveal a cavernous maw filled with rows upon rows of needle-sharp, interlocking teeth, and a long, prehensile tongue that lolled out, tasting the air. A new voice echoed in the ruined hallway, a layered, guttural sound that was a fusion of Izuku's voice and the symbiote's hiss. Our turn! The creature calling itself Echo moved. It was no longer dodging. It was attacking. It crossed the distance between them in a single, silent bound, its movements impossibly fast. Bakugo barely had time to raise his arms in a defensive X before Echo was on him. One black, clawed hand, impossibly strong, grabbed Bakugo's gauntlet and, with a screech of protesting metal, crushed it. The complex machinery inside was pulverized. Bakugo stared in horror, his greatest weapon destroyed with casual, contemptuous ease. The other hand shot out, not as a fist, but as a spray of thick, black tendrils. They wrapped around Bakugo's limbs, his torso, his neck, pinning him instantly. He struggled, setting off small explosions, but they were like firecrackers against the thick, living bonds. The tendrils simply absorbed the kinetic force. Echo lifted Bakugo off the ground, bringing him face to face with its monstrous visage. Bakugo could see his own terrified reflection in those blank, white eye patches. He could smell the ozone from the blast, mixed with a strange, organic, alien scent. Still think we're weak, Kakin? The layered voice rasped, the name a mocking echo of years of abuse. Still think we're a pebble on the side of the road? Bakugo couldn't speak. He was paralyzed, not just by the tendrils, but by a pure, primal fear he had never known. This wasn't Deku. This was a demon wearing his childhood friend's face. The monster leaned in closer, its hot, foul breath washing over Bakugo's face. You told us to take a swan dive. What a good idea. It began to squeeze. In the command room, there was dead silence. The students were pale, horrified. All Might was frozen, his heroic smile completely gone, replaced by a look of stark terror. He had gambled. He was watching himself lose. All Might! Call the match! Kirishima yelled, his voice cracking. He's going to kill him! All Might's hand shot toward the microphone button, but before he could press it, something changed. The pressure on Bakugo lessened. The monstrous face before him seemed to contort, to struggle with itself. One of the white eye patches narrowed, as if in pain. No! Stop! This time, it was just Izuku's voice, strained and thin, fighting its way through the monster's growl. This is enough. He's beaten. The symbiote roared its protest in his mind. He is not broken. His will remains. We must finish this. Assert dominance. I am the one in control. Izuku screamed back, pouring all of his willpower, all of his heroic conviction, into a single command. Enough! The monstrous form shuddered. The fanged maw closed. The tendrils loosened their grip, dropping a trembling, hyperventilating Bakugo to the floor. The creature stood over him, its form shifting, receding, the monstrous features melting away until it was just Izuku again, standing in his tattered, semi-organic costume. He was panting, his body shaking from the strain of reasserting control. At that exact moment, Uraraka's voice came over the comms, bright and triumphant. The weapon is secure! Hero team wins! The final buzzer sounded. Izuku looked down at Bakugo, who was still on his knees, his head bowed, his body trembling uncontrollably. He hadn't just been beaten in a training exercise. He had been psychologically dismantled. His entire worldview, built on the foundation of his own strength and Deku's weakness, had been shattered into a million pieces. Izuku turned and walked away, not looking back. He had won. But it felt like the most profound loss of his life. He hadn't just defeated a rival, he had terrified his classmates, horrified his mentor, and unleashed a monster he wasn't sure he could ever truly put back in its cage. The echo of the monster's snarl was louder than the cheer of victory.